Hello and welcome back to Book and Page. Now that we know a little bit more about Greek comedy, we can finally start in on Aristophanes himself. We'll be starting with his play The Frogs, because it's my personal favorite. In this play, Dionysus is heading into the underworld to bring back Euripides, one of the playwrights. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first half of Act 1, Scene 1. The play opens with Dionysus coming on stage, looking a little bit silly. You see, he's wearing a bright yellow tunic that looks rather feminine. And keep in mind, of course, this is Greek, so there is a big difference between masculine and feminine for them. Boots that are more usually worn by tragedians than anyone in a comedy, and of course, the lion pelt that identifies Hercules, along with a really big club. Evidently, he's planning on impersonating the man. He's also planning on heading to visit him, but with him is actually a servant. A servant whose name is going to be hard for me to pronounce. Xanthias, so I'll be calling him Zan. And Zan, well, he's wondering what bit of comedy bravo he should start with. Dionysus shoots down all his suggestions. Ultimately, poor Zan just complains that he's carried all these props that are very heavy and doesn't get to use them for anything. They're at Hercules' house though, so while Zan gets off the donkey and puts all of his burden down, Dionysus knocks on the door. Hercules does answer, but in absolute hysterics at what Dionysus is wearing. He's apparently, it's a little bit funny. When Hercules does calm down, he asks Dionysus what's up, and Dionysus tells him that he was involved in a battle, he was reading a play, he's got a real craving. And they establish the craving, the desire he has is for Euripides, and works by Euripides. Turns out, though, Euripides is dead. So for a while, Hercules and Dionysus discuss the other possibilities, other tragic playwrights that are currently alive that Dionysus could enjoy but doesn't want to, and other playwrights he could bring back from Hades rather than Euripides, which Dionysus also shoots down. He's not here for Hercules' opinion on his wants and needs. He is, in fact, here, though, for advice on how to get to the underworld. Hercules then suggests a couple of ways for good old Dionysus to kill himself, but Dionysus says, no, I want to go the way you went, and Hercules finally gives him instructions on how to find Charon and get a ride over the river Styx. He wishes him the best of luck and then heads back inside. Hercules, everybody. Ultimately, Dionysus ends up trying to help his servant out by getting a corpse to carry all of the equipment. The price the corpse wants, though, far too high, so poor Zan's gonna have to carry everything. And he's apparently going to have to walk. You see, Charon is willing to give Dionysus a trip, but Zan is a slave, and a slave that didn't die in a battle, so he'll have to walk around. Dionysus, though, he's not having much fun either. He's gotta row the boat. And that's where we're finishing off, right before the introduction of the titular frogs. Now, first and foremost, you might be wondering why I'm pronouncing Hercules rather than Heracles. Yes, there is a difference. Heracles is technically the correct way of pronouncing it because it is Greek. Yes, Hercules is actually the Roman name for Heracles. Heracles changed his name to Heracles to try and please Hera, so that she wouldn't try and kill him because of the whole being a kid of Zeus and not Hera thing. That didn't work, by the way. Hera still hates Heracles. That's why I'm going with Hercules. I'm not a big fan of Hera. So I'm going with the Roman one, and it's also the one most people know of thanks to Disney's Hercules, also using the Romanized version. So, for simplicity's sake, I'm going with Hercules, also a bit of a personal grudge. But if you're wondering why you're hearing people call him Heracles, it's a Greek name. I just don't like it. Hercules. Again, another big reason you always gotta take my videos with a grain of salt. I'm terrible at pronouncing things. I'm going with Hercules, which I know is the Romanized version, and I'm calling the servants Zan. Dionysus, though, is going by Dionysus, which is the term used throughout here, but again, he also has multiple names, so it's a toss-up. Bacchus is thrown around, but we're going with Dionysus. We're going with the normal, relatively Greek pantheon Dionysus name. And, oh boy, is this opening just the weirdest mix-ups of being aware of what's going on and not being aware of what's going on. From the very beginning, the first conversation happening is between Dionysus and Zan about what comedy bit Zan should start the play off with. Like, they're well aware they're in a performance. That's some fourth wall breaking right there. And it's not just by the high characters. It's not just Dionysus. A servant is literally aware of what's going on. He actually states that all of the equipment he's carrying around are props for performance. It does become a question then of what is actually happening here. Are we in a play? Are we looking at a play within a play? Are we seeing performers performing as performers? Or is there something more to it? Is it because that Dionysus, and thus his servant, as gods, are aware of the layers of understanding between gods and humanity, and how gods have to be presented through literature and through the stage, and can't be presented in real life? Who even knows? What's even weirder, though, is it doesn't just stay this way. We start with such an awareness of these characters that they know that they're in a performance, and then we quickly lose track of that in some really weird ways. Now, Hercules never has this moment of being aware he's in a performance. He starts off laughing at a god for the outfit he's wearing, and unapologetically laughing at a god for the outfit he's wearing. Which you'd think if he was aware that Dionysus was a god, you wouldn't do that. Especially, again, if you look at some of the tragedies involving Dionysus. He's not exactly a stable god. He will act violently if he feels he's being treated with disrespect. Which, being laughed at directly by Hercules, is being treated with disrespect. So you're thinking, okay, Dionysus and his servant are very aware of what's going on, but Hercules is not. Well, that's not true either. Hercules is actually directly aware of what is happening. He actually knows his relationship to Dionysus. He calls him little brother. And this might seem strange, but you have to keep in mind that both Dionysus and Hercules are sons of Zeus. And specifically sons of Zeus by mortal women. Dionysus has that weird thing, though, where he was actually sewn up in Zeus's thigh when his mother asked to see Zeus's true form, and burned up because of it. This double birth of sorts ended up meaning that Dionysus was considered a full god and actually joined the Olympians, while Hercules ultimately remained a demigod and had to do a lot of work to be recognized as anything. It seems a little unfair, especially since, at least within this realm of things, Hercules is assuming his birth came before Dionysus. Dionysus is the little brother of this relationship, not the big one. Altogether, it means that Hercules is actually aware, at least of who he's talking to, though we're not sure he's as aware as Dionysus is that this is a performance of some sort. He might be, though. The back and forth they actually have, again, can come across as antagonistic. Thankfully, both people are relaxed about it, which is why it's showing up in a comedy. But the fact is that Hercules actually tells Dionysus he has a poor taste in tragic writers. Like, he doesn't like Euripides. Well, Dionysus does. Dionysus actually takes this very well, too. He basically says, you have your taste, I have mine. I'm not here to argue whether or not certain tragedies are better than others. I'm here to do what I want to do. The second part of the conversation, that being how Dionysus can get into the underworld, is even worse. They're actually having a full conversation in which Hercules suggests several different ways for Dionysus to kill himself. He basically says, well, you can find a rope and a scaffolding, or you could go by the sophisticated route, which is porter and pestle and mortar, which basically means poison yourself with hemlock, or you could walk to the top of the tower and walk off. Like, there's so many suggestions that are kind of horrific when you look at the idea that this is a demigod talking to a god and making these suggestions. Having just come off of Percy Jackson, this is in no way to talk with the gods. But something switched here because we are in a comedy. And what's really weird is that switch is applied to everything. A comedy, like we talked about last video, is meant to be the low characters getting hurt and bumbling around. That's why it's funny to watch. But if you look, the characters we've met, other than Zan, who's just a slave, should be high characters. We have a literal god and a literal demigod hero. Yet somehow we've switched everything so much that we can now laugh without fear. And part of that is actually that awareness displayed at the very start of the play. If Dionysus is himself aware that this is meant to be a comedy and that's going to have comedic routines to it, then suddenly we're invited to laugh. Dionysus is in on the joke. He knows what's going on, so it's okay. In fact, he's critiquing comedies that rely too much on certain aspects of humor. We're going out of the box on this one by having Dionysus on stage and having him be the butt of the jokes. But he's in on it, so we can laugh. As long as the high characters are in on the joke, then it's okay. So that first exchange of Hercules looking at Dionysus' strange outfit, that's Dionysus inviting Hercules in on the joke so that we can then have this full conversation. And it's going both ways. Hercules, again, is not punching down on Dionysus. The number of times he suggests ways of killing Dionysus, Dionysus always has snappy comebacks ready to go. The hemlock comment is fantastic because he says, I don't want to get cold feet. Well, cold feet in here isn't a reference to being afraid to do it. It's the fact that hemlock poisoning historically actually gave you cold feet. That was how people knew it was working. If you're wondering why this is considered sort of the upper way of dying, well, consider the fact that Socrates died of hemlock poisoning. It's actually an execution method for members of the Greek community, which is to say, Athenian men. Socrates, found guilty in a trial, is actually given hemlock and who reports that his feet go cold. This play references topics that these people are well aware of, but everybody is in on the joke, so you are invited to laugh along with Dionysus and Hercules here. And it's sort of nice to recognize the uncomfortable things and address them in a funny way. The fact is that trips to the underworld are usually deeply, deeply uncomfortable, but this entire time they're actually playing it off. Dionysus asks for restaurant recommendations. How do I avoid the creepy crawlies? Would you have any suggestions for souvenir shops? It's making light of a very frightening aspect of life, which is death. And it's doing so by first and foremost saying, hey, look here, this is a play. Look, we're in a play. We're in a play. And it's funny. Hercules is laughing. Dionysus is laughing. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about Hades. It goes into the hard topics lightly. By doing it in steps, by drawing strict attention to the fact that this is fake, this is a play, we are allowed to laugh at this. Don't take it too seriously. And then by bringing in characters we recognize, such as Hercules. This is now a familiar play. We know what's happening here. We've seen Hercules a number of times in stories and plays. Oh, we're going in a different direction, but that's okay because we know who's here. We know Hercules. We know Dionysus. A little banter, a little back and forth. Okay. And now we're starting to get into the darker topics. And this is even carried fully on before we even get to Hades by bringing the corpse in and having that a funny joke. The corpse shows up being carried like this is a freshly dead person. But there's no one weeping, there's no one wailing, there's no one crying. This is not a horrific happening like in tragedies. This is a natural part of life, and hey, since you're going anyways, will you carry my bags? And then the corpse says, no. Even in death, things in life are still applicable. You want a service, you gotta pay me. And you gotta pay me my price. If you're not willing to, well, I'm just going to keep going. Carriers on, bearers on. They can walk themselves. This entire play is addressing something that is meant to be uncomfortable. And it does so by drawing you into the fact that it is a play very explicitly. We're having fun here. We're laughing. This isn't anything dark or dangerous or scary. We're okay. And that's actually a really interesting part of this play. Learning to laugh in the face of death quite literally. In fact, if you look, one of the people that tends to show up when death occurs is Hermes. Hermes protects people on the road to death. Hermes is also a notable trickster god. Death doesn't have to be frightening, even in the Greek sense. The tragedies are always going to show you the end, but the comedy is here to say, but there's more. There's more in life than just death. So let's play with it a little bit. Let's have some fun. Let's relax and see where this takes us. And let's laugh along the way. And then it actually shows us Charon and his boat and Dionysus rowing. And in this moment, it is making a social commentary. But again, that blends in because we're laughing at Dionysus rowing the boat into Hades. But who is not in the boat? That would be Zan, who is told since he's a slave and didn't die in a battle, that he's got to walk around. That's a social commentary. Your position in life decides what happens to you in death. Well, that doesn't seem fair. But it's okay, because it's evened out, right? Dionysus has to row now. You can almost forget the fact that something is being pointed to in Zan having to walk with all the luggage by the fact that Dionysus rows. And that comment might actually be that things do even out after death. You might have to walk, but everybody else has to row. It is absolutely fascinating how from the very beginning of this play, Aristophanes invites us in to watch a play and to laugh at frightening things. There's going to be social commentary all the way through, but we're sitting here laughing because we are well aware it's fake, it's not real, and it has no real consequence. Because if you notice, Dionysus' awareness actually vanishes very quickly. He invites us in to laugh with him by being aware it's a play. Being aware of his relationship with Hercules invites Hercules to banter with him. But from here on out, Dionysus isn't godlike. The corpse refuses to carry his luggage because Dionysus isn't willing to pay. Well, any other god would have been like, I'm a god if you're doing it anyways. But that awareness is gone now. Because the awareness was only needed to assure the audience it is okay to laugh and enjoy itself. And then the comedy is actually continued by the lack of awareness in its characters. And that switch is really key. So we need to watch Dionysus through this, because he's going to switch a couple of times. He's wearing a lot of costumes coming onto the stage. Again, in that awareness that this is a performance. But he is going to continue to change characters, or at least try, as we go through. So we should always try and see what character Dionysus is presenting, and how aware of the acting he is. Because he starts extremely aware at the start of the scene, and by the midpoint that awareness is gone. And you're so sucked in that you are aware of a play, but that fact disappears. And you now accept the absurdity as it comes. An excellent way to start a comedy. So, I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. We're finishing up Act 1, Scene 1, next video, with the second half. See you next time.